Hi, this is Mark Wright, pastor of Mandeville Christian Church, and happy Mother's Day. We are celebrating Mother's Day, May 10th, Sunday. And the series that we are in right now is God is Bigger Than This. And what does Mother's Day have to do with that theme? A lot. Because in a time of crisis, when we have a huge problem that we're facing, mothers are often, usually on the front line, helping us, giving us wisdom, giving us direction to solve the problem that we're facing. Now, I want to talk about such a problem in Exodus chapter 1, and we see the example of a godly mother, and we can learn from her life the way she deals with this terrible, terrible problem. There was an order from the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, and it's found in Exodus chapter 1, verse 22. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people: every boy that is born, you must throw him into the Nile, but let every girl live. So it's talking about the Hebrew children. It's talking about baby Moses and all the other children born at that time, male children. They were to be thrown into the Nile. Now, this is an example of tyranny. This is an example of evil. This is an example of a dictator giving an evil order. It is a satanic order. And we have seen throughout history that Satan wants to kill babies. Satan has a scheme to attack your children. And we see what this godly woman, this godly mother did to circumvent Pharaoh's evil, satanic order. And I'm going to read now from Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. Now a man of the house of Levi married to a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds among the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Okay, so I want to give you 6 characteristics of this godly mother. This godly mother. Of course, the common denominator is love. She loved her child. 6 characteristics. Number 1, faith. Now, faith is not found in the passage we just read, but faith is found in Hebrews chapter 11. Moses' mother, even though we don't know her name, she made it into the faith chapter. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months. So it was an act of faith. And this is the first characteristic. Mothers of faith. Faith is a characteristic for motherhood that's so important. Thank God for the women of faith, the mothers of faith in my life. Now, there's something remarkable here, and that is, where did this woman get her faith? She was a slave. She was uneducated. She didn't read or write. She didn't have the Bible. Where did she get her faith? The Bible hadn't been written yet. Where did she get her faith? The Hebrews passed down stories from generation to generation. And these stories were of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of how God made promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So all she had was oral stories that she had heard since childhood, and she chose to believe in God. But here's the remarkable thing. In these stories, God promised to bless Abraham and his descendants like the stars of the heavens and the sand of the sea, and God would bless them and multiply them. And yet, Abraham's descendants were now living in slavery. She was a descendant of Abraham, a child of Abraham, a daughter of Abraham, but she had been living in slavery for 400 with her ancestors for 400 years. And she had faith. Many people wouldn't believe in God after that, but she had faith. Now, she had faith because she understood this crisis and she knew that God had to intervene to save her child, and she took action. But the first characteristic is faith. Godly women are women of faith. They believe in God. They trust God. And because they have faith, they have integrity. Because they love God and they believe in God. I thank God for the godly women, the godly mothers I've had in my life, my own mother and both of my grandmothers. I thank God for women of faith, godly mothers who have faith. The second characteristic is she was wise. She was wise. Now, she faced a terrible dilemma. But in verse 3, it says that she realized she could no longer hide the baby. I mean, how long can you hide a child? Sooner or later, it will be discovered that you have a child. And she realized she could no longer hide the baby, but she realized that there was a sinister plot. She knew that Pharaoh wanted to kill her child. She was wise. Now, wise mothers today also understand that Satan has a plot to destroy children. That was true then. It was true in Jesus' day that Herod made an edict to kill all of the male babies born, to massacre all of the male babies born at the time of Jesus. And it's true today. It's true today. Satan has a sinister plot to kill babies inside the womb or outside the womb. And she had wisdom. She had wisdom to circumvent Pharaoh's evil order. She imagined in her mind that maybe if Pharaoh's daughter could just see this child, if Pharaoh's daughter could just see this child, Pharaoh's daughter may have mercy on the child. Now, it was common knowledge, most likely, that Pharaoh's daughter had a favorite place on the bank of the Nile where she went to. That was most likely public knowledge because Pharaoh's daughter didn't show up all by herself. She had an entourage. She had servants. She had bodyguards. And so it was known of the particular place that Pharaoh's daughter frequented to bathe in the Nile. So her plan was to place that baby not out in the middle of the Nile. Those stories are not accurate. She placed the baby in the reeds, which in the tall grass. So the baby couldn't float out in the middle of the river, but the baby was actually in the water where the grass was growing up. And one of Pharaoh's daughter's servants saw the baby. And Pharaoh's daughter had compassion. Wisdom. Wisdom. Wisdom is a way of circumventing all of the problems of life. Moses' mother had wisdom. She saw a crisis. She saw a terrible dilemma. She saw a sinister plot. And she sought God's wisdom, and God gave her wisdom, and God intervened. Wise mothers today look for ways based on wisdom to protect their children from the attacks of the enemy. So wisdom is number 2. Number 3 is resourcefulness. Now this gets down to the practical nitty gritty. In verse 3, it says that she coated the papyrus basket. A papyrus basket will sink. Now it was shallow water, but she still didn't want the baby to sink. She coated the papyrus basket with tar and pitch so it would be waterproof, so it would be buoyant, so it would not sink. She was resourceful. And godly women are resourceful. They know how to stretch a dollar. They know how to make do in impossible circumstances. Moses' mother was a slave. She was living in poverty. She probably had very little, if any, income, but she made do with what she had. My grandmother, Julia Ingram, raised 10 children, and she had most of them during the Great Depression. And she knew how to feed a family with virtually very little money. Very little money. She knew how to feed a family. I visited, when I was a little boy, my grandmother Julia's vegetable garden 45 years after the Great Depression. But when I walked out the back door of her house, at the bottom of the steps, that was where the vegetable garden began. Her entire backyard was a vegetable garden. And she knew how to feed a family with very little money. And she kept that tradition alive her entire life. Resourcefulness. Now, resourcefulness is going to be a very important life skill as we face difficult economic times. Learning to make do with very little. Moses' mother was resourceful. And godly mothers, when they need to be, are resourceful. They know how to take care of their own. They know how to feed their family. They know how to protect their family, even when they have very limited resources. She was resourceful. That's number 3. Number 4, she sought the child's own best interest. In verse 3, she placed the child among the reeds. She didn't do that because that's what she wanted to do. She didn't do that because she wanted to take her child out and leave him at the bank of a river. She didn't want to walk away from that child. She didn't want to abandon that child. That was not what she wanted. But she knew that in order for that child to have a future, she needed to take actions, drastic actions, and she did it in the best interest of her own child. And that is a characteristic of godly mothers today. They act in the best interest of their children. That's number 4. Now, I'd like to read verses 5 through 10 to get the final 2. Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. And the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." Okay. Financial intelligence is the next characteristic. Characteristic number 5. Now, it may not have been Moses' mother's plan to make money. Her plan was probably simply to save her children. But godly women often grow in the area of financial intelligence, and they learn how to manage their money. Verse 10 says that Pharaoh's daughter paid Moses' mother to nurse her own baby. Now that was intervention, that was miraculous. That probably wasn't Pharaoh's daughter's doing, but the point I want to make is simply this. Financial intelligence is an important life skill. And Christian women today grow in this area as they become mothers and they learn to manage their resources and raise a family. Financial wisdom is so important. Making the right financial decisions is so important, and it'll be even more important as we go through this COVID-19 crisis with the economy also in crisis, with 30 million people unemployed. Financial intelligence, it's so important to strive to make the right decisions financially. It takes stress off of your life. You have less stress when you make responsible financial decisions. This woman was paid by Pharaoh's daughter to nurse her own children. God worked that out for her. And I imagine that she managed that money wisely. She managed that money wise. Financial intelligence, an important life skill, and all the more important today as we're facing this COVID-19 crisis. And the final one, number 10, willing to sacrifice. A godly mother is willing to sacrifice. And we see that twice in this passage. The first time when Moses' mother laid baby Moses at the bank of the Nile in the reeds. And the second time we see it in verse 10, when after Moses' mother had nursed the baby and weaned him, he was probably a small boy at this time, Moses' mother took him back to Pharaoh's daughter and gave him to her. She was willing to sacrifice. She was willing to sacrifice. Godly mothers are sacrificial. They do what is needed. They do what is needed for the life of the child, for the best interest of the child. So there we have 6 characteristics of godly motherhood. Number 1, faith. Number 2, wisdom. Number 3, resourcefulness. Number 4, seeking the child's best interest. Number 5, financial intelligence. Number 6, willing to sacrifice. Now, sadly today, many people suffer in their own homes a domestic situation where they grow up without the support of a godly mother. They grow up without the support of a mother that has these characteristics. There's many women that have children that are not ready to have children. And if your mother was like that, I want to say a few things to you. Number 1, you need to forgive her. You need to forgive her. Number 2, don't get stuck in a generational chain, a generational enslavement where you become like your mother. Learn these characteristics of what it means to be a godly parent, whether you're a father or a mother. Learn to be a parent with faith, a parent that's wise, a parent that's resourceful, a parent that seeks the child's best interest, a parent with financial intelligence, a parent that's willing to sacrifice. Learn from the example of Moses' mother and the other examples in teaching throughout the Bible. Also, in today's world, we're facing a crisis where the world has values, false values, destructive values, and these false values will destroy our children if we allow it. As Christian parents, we must be responsible, we must intervene, we must protect our children. These characteristics are so important today for Christian parents, Christian mothers, and Christian fathers. Faith, wisdom, resourcefulness, seek the child's best interest, financial intelligence, and willing to sacrifice. Now I want to close with this. Every year I tell this story at Mother's Day, and it's a story of Scarlett the cat. Scarlett the cat. Scarlett was a stray cat. She didn't have a home, and she got pregnant, and she lived in Brooklyn, New York, and she found an abandoned building to make her home. The only problem with that abandoned building was dilapidated. It was in bad shape, and some street thugs used the building for drug transactions and to do dope in the building. And one day the building caught on fire. And when the fire department arrived, they saw something that was incredible. The firemen saw Scarlett, the mother cat, come out of the building with a kitten in her mouth. And Scarlett brought that kitten and left it on the ground. Now that's not the amazing part. Here's the amazing part. Scarlett ran back into the burning building. Cats don't run into burning buildings. Cats run away from burning buildings. And Scarlett did that not only once, but she did it, I believe, 4 times until all of her kittens were outside and safe. And here there's something very powerful about motherhood. The instinct of motherhood is more powerful than the instinct of survival. The instinct of survival tells a cat, don't go into that burning building. That's the instinct of survival. Run the other direction. But the instinct of motherhood was more powerful, so that Scarlett risked her own life and ran into that building several times until she saved all of her kittens. Well, the postscript is very beautiful. They took Scarlett to a veterinarian clinic, and she became famous. All of the kittens survived except for one. They were all adopted. Scarlett was adopted. Scarlett was on the Animal Planet TV show, the very first animal to be featured on that TV show. Scarlett was on the Oprah Winfrey show. Thousands and thousands of people sent letters to the veterinarian clinic wanting to adopt Scarlett. Beautiful story, but it shows how motherhood is so powerful. Motherhood puts the best interest of the child first. So again, I want to leave you with these 7 principles. Number 1, godly mothers are filled with faith. Godly mothers are wise. Godly mothers are resourceful. Godly mothers seek the child's best interest. Godly mothers seek financial intelligence. And godly mothers are willing to sacrifice. I want to wish you a happy Mother's Day. God is bigger than any problem you will face. And God raises up mothers to help us face those problems. God is bigger than this. Happy Mother's Day.